Hi, welcome to Lessons I Learned in Law. This week I'm joined by Pola Karolczyk. Now, Pola is she's visiting London this week to join a conference, but she is general counsel at Cowboy, and she's also chief people officer at Cowboy as well. Now, Cowboy, if you don't know, based in the Netherlands. I see the bikes buzzing around all the time, but they're a manufacturer of e-bikes based in Brussels. Pola started her career out in Poland. She worked as a competition lawyer, so we hear about the drive and the determination that she had to expose herself to competition work early on in her career before she relocated to Brussels to join Sidley Austin, one of the world's largest law firms. At a point in her career, she decided a move in-house was after having experienced that on a secondment to eBay. She moved to Apple as their first lawyer based in Brussels in Europe, where she was at the forefront working on regulatory work as well as competition and antitrust work as well. She joined Cowboy just over a year and a half ago to be their first lawyer, where she sits on their leadership team and has been exposed to a whole load of new areas and fascinating experience that she's getting working directly reporting into the CEO and making up part of their leadership team. So some really great experience of what it takes to work in a large best in practice business like Apple to moving into a smaller scale up organization and the challenges and experiences that has opened up to her. So lots in there for everyone, and I hope you enjoy. Hi Paula.
Hi Scott.
Thank you for joining me.
Pleasure.
Coming to London.
Yes, it was a short train ride from Brussels.
Yeah, so you're based in, for our listeners' benefit. So you're based in Brussels.
Yes, I'm based in Brussels since many years.
Nice, and over for an event.
Yes,
week.
I came over for an event that you recommended to me.
Okay, cool. The Juro scale up event. Nice. I hope it lives up to expectation.
Yes, me too.
No pressure. No, they're really good. The guys at Juro, and a good networking opportunity, I think. So I've given a brief introduction and overview, but if you could start maybe by telling us where you're at today, your current role, and a bit about the business as well.
Sure. So I'm GC at Cowboy. I'm with the company since 1 year and a half now. I'm a member of the leadership team. I report to the CEO of Cowboy. Mm-hmm. And I also wear a second hat at Cowboy. Since last December, I also lead the people function.
Okay.
So I do two functions simultaneously, and I'm also the secretary of the board. So I'm also plugged into all things governance and strategy.
Cool. So for the non, I see Cowboy all the time in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
But for the
You're exposed.
Yeah, for other listeners. So it's tell us a bit about the business.
Yeah. So Cowboy is an e-bike company.
Uh-huh.
We believe we make the best looking and the most connected e-bike in the world. Mm-hmm. If you don't believe it, you can look it up and see for yourself. The main ambition of the company is to make a bike that is so good that you will leave your car behind in the garage and forget about it.
Okay.
So yeah, that's
Nice.
that's what we're striving for.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, and they're really aesthetically pleasing.
Yes.
Cool. Nice. And a year and a half you've been in that role.
Yes.
Great. Cool. Well, I'm keen to hear all about the people officer position, the head of people, and how that sits and wearing those hats. But we'll get on to a bit more about that. But we'll jump into lesson one if you could share that with us.
So I think my the first lesson I wanted to start with is the oldest one I've learned. I think a couple of years ago already, and that lesson is. That law is only interesting for lawyers, and nobody really cares about law besides lawyers. Uh-huh. And I think, it's kind of obvious if you come from the outside, but not so obvious for, if you study law for many years and then you practice it, you really become super passionate about it and about legal reasoning, and, you become a bit of a law nerd with time. And I think it's important to remember that the most of the world doesn't have the same legal exposure as you do, and it's just not interested in the workings of the law. Uh-huh. And once you realize it, then I think the next step is you have to tailor your communication style to to that learning. And if you talk to non-lawyers, you have to be, very brief, very specific, and remember that they're not interested on the kitchen of law. They're only interested in the outcome of that reasoning. So is your answer yes or no? And how is that going to help me?
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah. Where did you learn that lesson the hard way, or where did you learn it?
I think I started noticing that in a firm, when I was still in big law, and how clients when they interacted with us, how we communicated, and in more legal old style, and if we communicated very briefly and to the point, and that was usually met with more satisfaction. Once I moved in-house, that learning has only become deeper for me, and you're interacting with the business all the time, and they just want the pragmatic advice, the very specific to the point advice. And I think the most successful lawyers that I've met are really great communicators, people who can boil down that sometimes complicated message to something very simple, very digestible, something that can be applied, and that's the art of law, boiling down the complicated stuff to something very...
Yeah, for others to understand. Nice. So where did you start? So you're like, give us a bit of your career background. Where did you start out, and before moving in-house?
So I think I've changed my career many times within law, but I switched gears many times. I started as national lawyer in Poland.
Okay.
And when I graduated from university, I really wanted to do competition law, but there were only 3 firms at that time in Poland with a competition law practice.
Right.
So I went into one of those firms and I practiced competition law and really loved it. And at some point I was like, I want to work on bigger cases. Poland is still a fairly young market with not such interesting cases. And I really wanted to move to Brussels and work on really challenging stuff.
Okay.
So I went to the US, I did an LLM there, to sort of reposition myself a bit, and then I applied for roles in Brussels, and I started at City Austin, and I got a chance to work on my big competition cases. We were involved in cases for some of the complainants against Google at the time of the big Google antitrust case. So yeah, I had my fun in big law. And then I decided to switch gears again, and I took a role at Apple, where I stayed for 5 years. I was senior counsel there. I looked after a region of 20 different countries in Central and Eastern Europe, so mostly supporting sales of Apple in those countries. And I had a second hat. I was supporting the policy team at Apple, working mostly on forward-looking legislation, so not actual law, but the law that was coming up, advising them on that.
Okay, nice. And going back to making that switch from Poland to Brussels, heartbeat of competition, how easy was that to find those opportunities? And like we as recruiters, we're often approached by lawyers from other jurisdictions looking to move, and it's often not the easiest transition to make. How did you engineer that?
I think when I was still at Poland and I started talking about what I want to do, people were like, "But how are you going to do this exactly?" Right?
Yeah.
And so with like no really international exposure, and I don't come from like mixed nationalities, so just Polish, coming from Poland. But what I realized is you have to sort of reposition yourself somehow, right? And for me, the way to do it is the way to do that at that time was to do the LLM. So I chose the LLM program at Berkeley, which was very technology focused.
Right.
And I did that program. I applied from Berkeley. Berkeley had a number of job fairs. And I managed to get my role in Brussels at City Austin.
Cool.
Yeah.
And what's life like in Brussels? What's the culture shift there from working? Where were you in Poland at that point?
I was in Warsaw.
In Warsaw to Brussels. How was that switch?
So Brussels is way more international than Warsaw. So that was exciting. But in terms of business culture, I think Brussels is a bit more relaxed. It's still a very governmental focused city, while Warsaw is very business-like, very intense working culture. So overall, I really enjoyed it because in Brussels you get all the interesting international exposure without the cutthroat, sometimes business culture of like big cities.
Yeah. Okay. And it's quite like competition and regulatory heavy. It's just the heartbeat of the professional environment there. How is the network there? Like, as a professional in that environment? Does everyone know everyone? Is it quite?
Lots of people know each other after a while, yes. So you're going to have a lot of friends who do policy, because that's what you do in Brussels, a lot of policy. So I think a lot of lawyers that come from Brussels, they are quite fluent in policy, because that's just a part of the work that you don't necessarily have the same kind of exposure in other jurisdictions. You're going to have a lot of friends also working for the Commission and other international bodies based in Brussels.
Nice. Cool. And on the lesson on the advice and distilling that advice down, so your first move in house was to Apple? Was that?
Well, I had like a short stint at eBay.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I was still at Sidley, one of our clients was eBay. And their general competition counsel was going on maternity leave, and she was looking for a maternity cover at that time, and the firm suggested that I take over, and so she accepted. So I did 4 months of being like a global competition counsel of eBay.
Okay.
Which was challenging coming from a firm and not having that in-house experience, but also really, really interesting, and I enjoyed it a lot. And that's when I realized I really want to go in-house, because that's where I fit the best with my skill set. Yeah.
And at that point, did you still have the competition law, antitrust focus? Was that, did you still want to be? I want to be in-house, but I want to be doing competition and antitrust and that type of
Yeah, that
work.
was my main focus for many years. But at the firm, I also started working on a lot of regulatory projects. So I was already, venturing out of competition a bit. Yes, I wanted to get a competition role, but once I started looking at roles in-house, I realized that maybe a broader role would be a better bet for the future. So the role I had at Apple it was a regulatory role initially, focusing on regulatory.
Yeah, okay. And I know big tech and organizations like that, I haven't heard much about Apple's, so I'm curious to ask, do they have a communication style? Like, I've spoken to people at Amazon, and it's very much like no memos, like everything's like to be distilled down. Is there a particular culture of communication?
So yeah, you will not see like an internal memo circulated at Apple. Definitely, we did read memos from firms, but yeah, there's a lot of emphasis on keeping it simple and just what I said, in my first learning, keeping it very pragmatic. Yeah.
Nice. Cool. And then the switch from Apple to Cowboy.
Yeah.
So first lawyer at Cowboy.
Yeah, I was the first Brussels lawyer for Apple.
Okay, all right. So you've had that experience,
which came a bit of a shock as a shock to me, because I imagine I was joining a really big company, and there's going to be already a big group of lawyers there. But I was actually the first Brussels-based lawyer for Apple ever.
Oh wow!
They were just starting to build that legal team there, and it was 2019. So at the time you would imagine they would have a much bigger team on the ground. Yeah.
Okay. Why was that? Why did they have?
They had, the Apple headquarters is in London. That's where most of the lawyers are based. Brussels was not a focus at that time, and was becoming a focus because a lot of regulatory activity. And so when I started at Apple, I was working with the policy team, and I had to convince them that they need a lawyer and that I'm a friend, not a foe.
Right. How did you do that?
Slowly but surely, yes.
Okay, yeah. So what's the role of But so policy is something that it often sits quite close. Like you'll see a lot of general counsel that have public policy and sitting as part of their wider function. What does that job look like? Having seen it as a lawyer, what do they do?
Well, it's what they do is the law of the future, right? So so obviously it's interesting for lawyers because that's going to be the regulation that will apply in the future. They're representing the interests of the company, trying to convince the regulator to regulate in a certain way that will be good for the business and not detrimental for the business.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is that the same as lobbying? Are they doing, or is that part of the role?
We don't use that word.
No, don't use that word. Okay.
We don't use the word lobbying in Brussels.
Okay, right, fair enough. Policy.
Policy,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Fair. Influencing.
Influencing, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Nice.
It's much
In the right
broader
way.
than law, but in the end it becomes law.
Okay.
So
Okay. Nice. Cool. Well, we'll move on to lesson 2.
lesson number 2.
Yeah.
So yeah, the second learning I wanted to share is, and that's something I also realized a couple of years ago, especially when I was still in my Apple role, is that I think as you progress in the legal profession, there's a really big emphasis on your technical skills in your day job. That's what is expected from you a lot, like to have really perfect technical skills. And that's what you pick up on the job. But what you're going to need at the end, as a GC or as a law firm partner, is a completely different set of skills. And these are difficult to pick up on the daily job.
Okay.
So you're going to have to sort of like venture outside and look for opportunities to learn these skills. Like for example, being a law firm partner is a lot about sales.
Yeah.
And a lot of associates, they have nothing to do with sales. And it's once they get to the partnership level, it's a very difficult switch where you have to go and represent the firm, get the business, convince people of your expertise and so on. And it's a different skill.
Yeah.
And it will be easier if you learn it earlier, doing things outside of just drafting, legal research and so on.
It's hard for like law firm or associates, I think, where the pressure and the drivers are very much on billable hour and hitting those numbers, and the reward for doing that is extracurricular almost up to a certain point where it isn't rewarded, I don't think, in the right way within a LLP necessarily. Was it something, were you conscious about doing that? Were you leaning into that type of stuff when you were in
when I was
practice?
Still in big law, I still thought I'm going to become a partner one day.
Okay.
I did a lot of conferences. I took a lot of speaking, appointments just to make sure I have the skill to market myself, but also to market the firm going forward. Yeah.
And what do you look for when you're building relationships now as an in-house lawyer, or the law firms are building relationships with you? Like, what type of engagement and relationships do you value as a
what do I appreciate
as a buyer? Yeah, what do you appreciate? What do you not appreciate?
I appreciate active firms that reach out to me. When something is happening in the company and it's public, and there are lawyers who reach out to me and say, hey, I noticed that, I read about it, I can help solve this. It happens that I reach out back and I say, I got your email, let's chat and, let's see if that is a real offer, like something that, we can benefit from. Or lawyers who share with me various insights from the industry, things I wouldn't have time to research myself, and that comes directly to my mailbox. That's great.
Yeah, good value add. Yeah. And in terms of sort of meeting face to face, do you do, like, with those relationships, how important, like the sales function of a partner, like how much of that, I'd imagine, again in Brussels, in that the bubble around the government, there must be lots of those insights being shared. But how does it work in terms of the relationship building?
I think it's important to have that kind of personal relationship with a outside counsel that you work on a regular basis, right? Because you have to trust them a lot, right? with various sensitive topics of the company, and you want this person to be able to be a good sounding board.
Yeah.
So you have to like them as a person a bit and trust them as a professional.
Yeah.
So it's not just exchanging memos.
Yeah.
It's more of a relationship. And I think it makes sense to take time to build it.
Okay. So you had spent time in Big Law and then at Apple, two large organizations. What was it like making that switch into Cowboy, where your first legal hire, scale up type environment? How did you find it?
I found it invigorating.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think in a big organization, you get a slice, like a certain slice of work you work on, and that's your focus. In a scale up, you're covering everything from A to Z, and you're also working under pressure a lot, and you really get to test yourself in a way.
Right.
Like, can I do this? Like, do I have the skills to lead? Do I, am I able to resolve, all the problems that come my way?
Yeah.
And that is, I find it very stimulating, very exciting in a way.
Different work to be involved in. How did you know, or like, what made you feel that was what you wanted to do and the path you wanted to go down?
Because I realized that my technical skills are at the level where I don't need to work on them anymore, and I wanted to move up within the organization. And I wanted to have a leadership role, which I knew that in a big organization it would take me a lot of time to get to that level. And a scale up, if you go to a scale up, you can sort of take a shortcut in a way and try yourself in this kind of role quicker.
Yeah.
And see if you really, if you're a good fit for it, if you like it, if that's something that you want to do in the future.
Nice. And what's been the biggest? Did you have any blind spots or feel there was anything that's been the biggest challenge in making that, stepping out of that environment into something less mature?
I think that was my third lesson. It's not that I wanted to share with you, but it's good that you're bringing it up.
Let's not jump to that then. I'll rephrase the question.
No, it's okay. It's okay. So that was my biggest learning from this. This is my biggest learning from the past year and a half, is that if you want to learn these leadership skills, it's probably better to be in an environment where you're a bit challenged and under pressure, because then you're forced to become very, innovative and think about things differently. So you're out of your comfort zone, and scale ups and startups, they offer that in bunches. So it's a great environment for learning this kind of stuff. And I think I had a bit of a resistance at the beginning, and then with time I started leaning in, and then I started enjoying the ride.
Yeah. Okay. And when you were looking for that type of role, so again, stepping away from Apple, from big tech, how did you know it was the right fit, the right organization to be joining? What were you looking for in that role?
Honestly, the role has found me.
All right.
So I was looking at different options. I was looking at roles still within big tech.
Yeah.
They would be less senior than the role I have right now. I was looking for, heads of legal as well, or like deputy GC roles. But Cowboy reached out to me, and I thought it was a perfect fit because it's a product that is similar in a way to Apple products, because it's hardware and software combined, which I really like. That brings a range of very interesting legal topics. You have the supply chain, but you also have all the software challenges. Yeah. So there's plenty of the meaty, interesting legal stuff. And the role was reporting to the CEO, which, I really liked. I met the leadership team before, and I realized that I'm going to have a very good connection with them, which was important for me. So all in all, they ticked a lot of my boxes, and so I said yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
And what's that like, having, again, stepping into that leadership team? Like, how did you prepare for that? And was that it? I'm making assumptions here, but in terms of leadership responsibilities at Apple and committees or execos, was that a new thing to be
that was
stepping into.
that was new for me. I was also the first woman on the leadership team, so that also felt a little challenging at the beginning. You know, it's a very male industry in that sense. You know, it's a biking industry. There's a lot of most of the team is male, so that felt a little challenging at the beginning as well. And I think you have to find your leadership style. You know, as you take on that first role, you have to find your leadership style and understand how you operate as a leader. Like how do you communicate as a leader? It takes a moment before you tune into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. And reporting into the CEO, so a lot of those positions, sometimes they're CFO reporting into or CEO. How important was that to you? And I guess is there an understanding as to why the organisation seen that legal sat reporting into the CEO?
I think it's important to be reporting to the CEO, not another function, because then your advice reaches the decision maker.
Yeah.
And there's nobody else translating and filtering it on the way, right? That relationship with the CFO is going to be important for every general counsel. You know, my mentor told me when I started this role that CFO and GC, they always need to be best friends. I think that's very true, because you're going to be communicating with the CFO probably on a daily basis. But that relationship with the CEO is also very important, because that's the decision maker. And so if you have something important to say, you want to have the direct dialogue.
Yeah, and the person doing the communicating. Yeah, makes sense. And mentorship, you spoke about a mentor there.
Yeah.
How important is that? And how did you identify, or
How did I end up?
Did it come around?
Yeah, so when I joined Cowboy, our CEO asked me if I had any special wishes.
Okay.
And I said, you know, if I can have one, I would like to have a mentor at the beginning, because this is my first GC role, and I would like to have someone I can chat to who could be a bit of a sounding board and tell me, you know, how they've done things in the past. And he actually had someone in his network that he recommended to me, and it has been a great relationship for me. I've been in that mentoring program for like 6 months, and it really helped me to get in the role, and you don't spend so much time second guessing yourself,
right.
You know, because you can talk to someone who has done this before, who has, you know, led to companies, to legal functions in 2 different companies before, so and also in the Silicon Valley, so with a, you know, probably with a bigger scope. Than that was something that I really valued. And you know, every once in a while I still write a message and say something.
Okay, so is it quite informal, just when you're and maybe?
Well, it was a formal mentorship mentoring program, but it is a relationship now that you know that I value.
And did you have that earlier on in your career? Do you feel you've had mentorship or anything more?
Official mentorships, no, but you know, in a firm, typically the partner you work with the most is someone that mentors you a bit, right? I did mentoring for younger lawyers. There's this big mentoring program in Brussels that you know I participated in, and I mentored younger lawyers. I think that's, you need to give back as well.
Yeah. I think it's important. How, as a mentor, what's the opening to that? How do you open a conversation as a mentor? Mentor me. Where do you start? Like,
you typically start by asking, what are your expectations from this mentoring program? What would you like to, accomplish here?
Yeah.
In what way do you need my support?
Okay.
And then with time, sometimes it turns out that, there was something defined in the beginning, and then it evolves. But yeah, you want to understand what the person brings, as a topic to work on. Yeah.
And have you had coaching as well? Do you have coaches and mentors? No.
But I think it's a fine line. Right?
Yeah, I think I guess the mentorship I see there, the importance that they've walked in your shoes is important, versus a coach could be it's just more coaching on the a soundboard generally, but having Yeah, I mean, I would have mentors that have been in larger recruitment organisations,
Yeah.
or have set up recruitment organisations that I would have specific questions on about that, a subject matter that they might know about.
Have you done some mentoring?
I've not mentored anyone other than people in my team, I would say. Yeah, so the jury's out. And then otherwise, yeah, like with people, I would have close friends who I would trust to ask questions on, who have scaled recruitment companies, and met through organisations, and coaching. I've had I've had a coach for a couple of years, who I find I think with the coach, you're often talking. You're doing a lot of the talking, and the answers come from within a lot of the time. I think the mentorship, you're looking for, what's
More
the guide
script,
here?
yeah.
I need an answer, or I could do with an answer on this. Have you, like, what do you think? I think the role of a coach is probably a little bit more impartial, and to be, it's a bit more coming to the answer yourself. Although they've got the person who, I think it's really important that you get the relationship right. So spoke with a lot of people, like spoke with, I don't know, 5 or 6 different coaches, and it turned out they were from a professional services background, and had gone into coaching, to give a bit back. And I find that lens of, like, the commercial lens is quite important, that they've been in. Yeah, they've been in a professional services background is quite helpful.
Did you use it to do the career switch? Was that the?
No. That was all just finding my feet and realizing that I wasn't winning being a lawyer. So no, that was very much just like it takes you to, you sort of kissed a lot of frogs and looked at a lot of things that I didn't end up exploring.
Yeah.
But yeah. And outside of work, what's your passion and interest in Brussels?
My children, for the moment,
Oh,
I have
cool.
2 very small kids. So.
What ages are they?
4 and 6.
Okay.
Yeah. So they are my passion by definition at the moment. Yeah.
And what school? So they're school age in Brussels. Are they Flemish speakers?
They are French speakers,
Okay.
but they also have to speak Polish,
Okay.
like I do, and they have to speak German, like my partner does.
Okay.
So it's a very complicated household in terms of languages.
Yeah. What's their first language? What do they go to?
So they don't have a first language. I always imagine that, for a human brain, it's important to have the first language.
Mm-hmm.
And even I read some article where they said, watch your kids and see in what language they play. Then you will know what is their first language.
Okay.
But when they are around me, they play in Polish, and when they are around my partner, they play in German. So
Wow.
I feel like it's really equal for them.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And do they speak French to one another, or?
No, rarely, unless they're with other French speaking kids.
Right.
Yeah.
And the makeup in Brussels between, is it French? Sorry, I'm completely ignorant. But it's not a French-speaking city, is it? Is it?
It's for the most part, I would say French-speaking city,
Okay.
but there's some like Flemish, parts of the city as
Right.
well, Flemish schools. So you get to choose. You could send your child to a Flemish school or to a French-speaking school.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, but we didn't do that because none of us would be able to do homework in Flemish. So.
Yeah. That's the challenge we've got. We'll edit out that ignorance of the language of Brussels. Never mind. Educate myself. Cool. So have we covered lesson 3? Or are we going to be going back over?
I think we did. So.
Right. So let's wrap. We'll wrap up. So no, we've sort of touched on your 3rd lesson.
Yeah.
But let's give it a home run. What is your third? What is your 3rd lesson? I've stumbled into pulling that out.
Yeah. So my 3rd lesson was that if you're aiming to learn for leadership skills, probably you don't want to be in a very calm, stable environment, because that's where you're not going to get in a lot of these challenges where you learn how to be a leader and navigate through crisis.
Yeah.
So, if you want to expose yourself to that kind of learning, the scale-up startups are a great environment for that.
Yeah, so it's been a good move in the
It's
last year.
For the goal I had, it was a great move. Yes.
Yeah, nice.
And I would recommend that to anyone who sort of wants to get out of their comfort zone and learn something different than the type of skills you learn in big organizations.
Yeah. And going through that process and looking at stepping into those roles, did you feel there were any concerns from the people at Cowboy that you were talking to that you hadn't worked in that smaller environment, and how you would adapt from working in Apple and a bigger organization?
Nobody voiced that to me.
Uh-huh.
I think the leadership team, as I met them, they felt we were going to be a good fit on a personality level. So, I never felt that they were sort of second guessing me.
Yeah.
I had a big win in the first 2 months where I settled a big litigation that the company was struggling with.
Yeah.
That sort of gave me a lot of credibility and sort of like the, budget of trust.
Yeah.
So, I never felt that they were questioning my ability to function in that environment.
But having been in, seeing best practice at Apple and then taking that and translating it into an organisation of that size is massive win for them. So it sounds great in terms of applying that.
Yeah, some things fit, some things won't fit, right?
Yeah,
because of the size. Yeah,
right. The difference. What and then what led to the other function, the chief people officer? Yeah.
So our CEO asked me to take it on at some point. I hesitated a little bit at the beginning because it's an HR role that I never had. But I think it's important for GCs to get exposure to other functions. I see more and more GCs taking on more than just one function because that legal training that we have can be applied in other fields very effectively. And now I find this, in legal that I can use a lot of the same skills in HR. That I can use a lot of my legal skills.
Nice.
So it broadens your impact on the organizations.
Yeah.
And it also you're picking up new skills.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how does that translate to your role on the leadership team? Are you wearing two hats in there?
I'm wearing
and
two
reporting
hats,
back
yes.
on both
Yeah,
both
I'm wearing
issues?
2 hats.
Okay.
I'm definitely more busy now too.
Yeah. And has that opened your eyes to something in the future, perhaps non-legal related or moving outside of the law?
And so I had a chat with another GC who now became COO. And so he runs 3 different functions in his company. And so I thought, I run 2, maybe I could run a 3rd one as well. And so that's a possibility for something that I would consider.
Yeah, nice. All right, we'll look forward to seeing what the future holds and hearing more about Cowboy and all the challenges that and interesting opportunities that lie ahead. But thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
A pleasure. I end with asking for a book or a podcast recommendation.
Okay.
Have you got any you recommend reading?
Yeah, so I think let's stick with a podcast. I didn't have a lot of time to read these things. So I would recommend Tom Bilyeu, The Impact Theory.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever
I've
heard
not,
about
no.
it. So it's American entrepreneur, the Silicon Valley entrepreneur who runs his podcast. I don't know, for the past 6 years. It's everything around entrepreneurship, but it's also a lot about optimizing your health and learning various skills or just leveling yourself up in a way.
Yeah.
And so I really enjoy listening to that.
Good practical tips.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, thank you for sharing. We'll have a great time in London. Enjoy the Scale Up GC conference. Touch wood. I hope you enjoy it. Report back, and been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
So that wraps up another episode of Lessons I Learned in Law, powered by Harriet Brown In-House Legal Recruitment. Now, I share these stories each week to help lawyers of all levels and both in private practice or working in-house. And it doesn't matter if you're early in your career or you're already leading a team. Learning from your peers or from those who have walked in your shoes before, then this is the show for you. If you find it useful, I would love it if you could share it with your colleagues or share it with your network or drop us a message just to let us know that you're listening and that you're out there. Feedback really helps us grow the show and take it in the direction that gives the most value to you, our listeners. So until next time, I've been Scott Brown. Thank you.